Welcome, powerful soul. You didn't stumble across this message, you were drawn to it. That alone means something. This isn't just another video, another post, or another voice in the crowd. This is a divine interruption, a moment hand-delivered from the unseen to remind you of what you already know deep down. You were never made to blend in. You were built to break through. If you've ever felt like the weight on your life didn't match your surroundings, if you've ever asked yourself, why is my battle so intense? Then this message is for you. Not the version of you the world tries to shrink, but the real you, the one that's rising, awakening, and refusing to stay quiet any longer. This space is sacred. It's not for everyone. It's for the set apart, the marked, the ones who walk through fire and still carry light. You are not crazy. You are not alone. And you are not here by accident. Get ready, because what's about to be unlocked in you is going to shake everything. You're not just watching, you're remembering. You're not just listening, you're activating. This is the divine transmission you didn't know you were waiting for. Let's begin. There are those who were set apart before time began, not by achievement or applause, but by an invisible thread that tied their existence to a higher order. That thread was stitched in silence, seen by none, yet it stirred unrest in realms far beyond the senses. Long before awareness took shape, forces beyond comprehension were already contending for what they saw hidden in this life. It wasn't earned, nor invited, it simply was. A quiet flame buried deep within, resisting every mold it was placed in. You are not here by accident. If you feel the pull, the knowing deep inside that you are chosen, this is your moment. Click the super thank you button and give $20 or more to unlock deeper insights, exclusive content, and a path that aligns with your divine purpose. This isn't just a contribution, it's a declaration, a step toward who you were meant to be. Answer the call, walk with us, and step fully into your destiny. Your journey begins now. No matter the setting, something always hummed offbeat inside. Places that dazzled others drained instead. Empty conversations echoed louder than truth ever could. Attempts to blend in only amplified the sense of being elsewhere, even while being present. The reason was never about taste or temperament. It was design. Born to unsettle false peace, built to hold a torch in hallways long abandoned by light. Early on, the signals came. Unexplainable moments of knowing. Waves of emotion without cause. Insights that arrived without instruction. It wasn't fantasy, it was the architecture of a calling making its presence known before the world had a name for it. What clings to this life is more than purpose, it's permission, the kind of authority not granted by status, but by unseen decree, the quiet echo of forebears who whispered into eternity for this moment to exist. A life crafted not to mimic the existing, but to disturb it, to speak in frequencies that unravel what's false, to breathe clarity into chaos. That's why resistance came before understanding ever did. Only what threatens is targeted. Only what holds power is fought early. The hardship wasn't coincidence. It was preemptive warfare. Eyes turned cold, doors slammed, silence followed success. Not because of flaws, but because something sacred was sensed before it was seen. What opposition failed to grasp was that the resistance was part of the agreement, not a denial, but a declaration. This life was shielded long before it could defend itself. The unease, the struggle, the inexplicable weight. It wasn't delusion, it was evidence. This is not fiction. It's the friction between destiny and delay. Now begins the reckoning. The realization that those quiet truths weren't confusion, but confirmation. not made to echo the crowd, but to become the voice that interrupts it. This life was never an accident. It's an answer. And the moment that becomes truth, everything that stood against it begins to fall. Some lives are not written for simplicity. They are forged with edges, pressure, and force because they carry currents powerful enough to disrupt the entire field of existence. One such life does not meander quietly. It arrives with unspoken orders encoded in its very pulse. It was not placed among the crowd to blend, but to divide what is hollow from what is whole. Before breath ever filled its lungs, the blueprint had already been drawn in dimensions language cannot reach. And that blueprint sends tremors through both order and opposition. Its influence does not come with noise or titles. It resonates like gravity, felt even in silence. Where it stands, atmospheres adjust. Words from this life do not echo, they imprint. The intention behind its movement cracks invisible walls, shakes illusions loose, and fulfills ancient hopes whispered in times long gone. This charge did not begin with the individual. It is an inherited flame carried forward under the weight of ancestral longing and unseen intercession. That is why this journey is anything but typical. The resistance is not random. It is the side effect of purpose. Destinies like this dismantle systems, rearrange spiritual currents, and shift long-standing narratives. Forces of light prepare ground for the rise of such a life, while forces of decay attempt to confuse, delay, and drown it in distractions. But even amid the mundane grind of daily struggle, a deeper truth pulses underneath. This life governs unseen infrastructure. It alters what others can't name. Its presence redraws maps in silence. Restoration follows where healing is chosen. Cycles break where intention is set. Faith becomes ignition, and every step toward alignment is a flare launched into the unseen. That is why silence gets loud with pressure, why clarity is constantly interrupted, why people fall away without warning. There's a transformation underway, and it unnerves the unseen. What is feared is not the past, but the unfolding potential. Because once alignment clicks into place, old strongholds collapse under the weight of awakened identity. History begins to bend. What once held back generations begins to fracture. One decision, one act of surrender becomes the catalyst for irreversible shifts. Every choice toward truth tips the scale, echoing far beyond personal gain. This isn't about surviving, it's about altering outcomes for everything connected to it. Timelines are flexible, not fixed. With every decision grounded in conviction, there is a reconfiguration of direction. The very forces observing this journey have done so from the first flicker of consciousness. Existence, in this case, is not passive, it is ignition. It lights the path ahead and the paths of those watching from the margins. The in-between is sacred ground, and with each bold step, it becomes evident. The storm wasn't punishment, it was proof of passage. The rise of such a life does not go unnoticed. It disturbs patterns that counted on silence. And when it finally takes its place, when it walks out its intention fully, nothing around it remains unchanged. The assignment is fierce, but so is the force behind it. And when that force moves, both ends of existence tremble. There are lives that carry fire before the flame is ever seen. And with that fire comes friction, unexplained tension, misplaced blame, pain that arrives before the promise. The path wasn't derailed because of mistakes. It was marked long before the journey began. The sting of betrayal, the silence in rooms where voice and value should have been honored, the heaviness that came in quiet seasons, it all pointed to something bigger hiding underneath the chaos. The setbacks weren't just life's randomness playing out. They were forecasts disguised as hardships. Before the first step toward identity could be made, the interference began. Not because of weakness, but because something dormant held more weight than the present showed. What seemed like disconnection was defense from what sought to prevent progress. The fractures in relationships, the unexpected grief, the invisible pressure, it wasn't life unraveling, it was opposition, recognizing movement before momentum became visible. None of it was accidental. The emotional fog, the confusion, the exhaustion. It wasn't without cause. A deeper reality was being contested, not for where the path had been, but where it was designed to lead. Every ounce of resistance was a prelude, not a punishment. It was spiritual turbulence stirred up by unseen entities who recognized the impact of clarity before clarity had even arrived. There was nothing average about the struggle, because the future being resisted held nothing average either. The resistance wasn't because of what was known. It was because of what would be known once the awakening happened. If healing truly took root, others would follow. If the silence turned into speech, whole narratives would collapse. If the shadows were faced, cycles would end. That's why the fight wasn't fair. It wasn't supposed to be. It was preemptive. Attacks don't circle still waters. They swarm where the current shifts. And this life shifted something just by existing. There's no need to target what won't rise. What was pursued was purpose, wrapped in flesh, unfolding slowly, threatening to break barriers just by becoming. That is what drew the weight so early. It wasn't about removing, it was about restraining what was inevitable. But the attempt didn't finish what it started. The pressure didn't destroy, it shaped. The silence didn't erase, it refined. Every collapse, every step taken without applause, every moment that didn't make sense was a seed under soil, not a burial. The retreat never came, though everything demanded it. Even when the air felt too heavy to breathe, the pulse kept moving forward. That refusal to collapse, against all logic, is what made the shift unstoppable. And now, the return has begun. Not as a restart, but as a rising. Not to reclaim something lost, but to embody something fully grown. The friction didn't win. The enemy didn't succeed in halting what was hidden. The proof is in the breath that remains. The next step isn't just a move, it's a fulfillment. This isn't entry into purpose. This is purpose catching up to prophecy, and the reverberation of that shift is undeniable. Every opposing force felt it before it happened, and now it's too late to stop. If you've been touched by God's grace, let that light shine. Click the super thank you button and sow a seed of $50 or more to fuel a movement of faith and transformation. Your giving is more than a gift. It's a declaration of His abundance. Be a channel of His blessings and watch His work multiply through you. Some forces are followed by silence, but their impact is unmistakable. There have been moments where the outcome should have been tragedy, where the fall seemed certain, yet somehow something shifted. A door closed an instant before harm entered. A voice warned just before misstep. A way opened when there was no way to explain it. What once seemed like uncanny timing now reveals itself as guided movement, intervention crafted not by accident, but by design. Before clarity was even a thought, the unseen had already formed its watch around this life. As identity was whispered into existence beyond physical hearing, sentinels were appointed, ones that shield, steer, and stand firm through storms not seen by the eyes. Even in the loneliest hours, when absence screamed louder than presence, something was always keeping pace just outside perception. The worst moments never unfolded to their full capacity because guardians were already rerouting what was meant to destroy. Many of the battles weren't meant to be won with effort, but with presence, fought not in open fields, but behind veils of silence. While doubt pressed against the chest, other forces were intercepting what would have shattered completely. The danger was closer than realized, the rescue more frequent than remembered. Paths were adjusted mid-stride. What seemed to be luck was actually architecture, deliberate and divine. What seemed like strength without reason, resilience in the midst of collapse, unexpected clarity in chaos. It was not self-generated. It was the evidence of partnership, not visible hands, but loyal forces carrying instructions from realms that don't require recognition. These entities don't simply hover. They assist, act, rearrange. They are invested in assignment, not applause. They surround moments of purpose, not performance. And the more truth becomes the compass, the stronger their movement becomes. Purpose draws reinforcements. Each time this life shifts in alignment with its higher call, presence thickens, creativity sharpens, direction clears. What once felt sealed becomes accessible. And when doors move that man cannot touch, the message is clear. Something divine is involved. Their form may never be known. Sometimes they appear in familiar faces, sometimes in strangers whose timing feels like prophecy, and sometimes they operate in the background, unseen but undeniable. Nothing survived so far by luck. Not the betrayals that didn't break, the failures that somehow forwarded progress, or the silence that was filled with unusual calm. These weren't gaps. They were covered spaces. When pressure intensified, the response wasn't retreat. It was reinforcement. That's how the journey was preserved when it had no logic to continue. Now comes the deeper shift. Not just being aware of support, but learning to move with it. Understanding that what walks alongside is not passive. These companions are not merely preserving breath, they are accelerating mission. Their presence increases as movement deepens, and their role is not protection alone, it's propulsion. They weren't sent to guard dreams, they were sent to help fulfill them. That quiet certainty guiding decisions, that calm whisper redirecting steps, that strange peace when reason fails, it is agreement, it is alignment. The sacred confirming the next move, the unseen declaring, this life is never advancing alone. This is what partnership looks like when eternity is involved. Some lives are not just watched, they're tracked, not for fame or failure, but because their very essence signals disruption. Long before comprehension, something within began disturbing invisible systems. Not because of arrogance, not because of perfection, but because this life was encoded with something that unsettles what prefers to remain unchallenged. There's a reason resistance met you at the start. It recognized the change you'd one day carry. The opposition took note before you had language for your purpose. While others saw confusion, something ancient marked you as significant. Blueprints you hadn't yet walked in were already being opposed. Forces took aim, hoping to fracture the vessel before the message was ever delivered. The early blows weren't accidents. They were calculated attempts to distort identity and reroute destiny through pain that felt personal but was deeply strategic. Those scars aren't ordinary. The betrayals weren't casual. The fog of doubt wasn't without source. These were tactical distractions meant to scatter your focus and seal your voice. The plan wasn't just pain, it was paralysis. But what was underestimated was your refusal to stay quiet. Every setback that should have ended you became the ground you pushed off from. You adapted. You kept moving. And now that you've started remembering what you carry, the pressure is intensifying. This isn't backlash for mistakes, it's backlash for momentum. The tide of warfare didn't rise because you lost your way. It rose because you found it. You're no longer entangled in approval. You've stopped clinging to what was never meant to hold you. Now that you're stepping into rhythm with your true role, the shadows are stirring. And they're not threatened by the past. They're terrified by the clarity of what's ahead. What chases you isn't random. Weakness doesn't draw this kind of attention. What does is power in motion. Quiet obedience that shakes invisible walls. Insight that reconfigures culture. Healing that multiplies across bloodlines. What you've been weathering isn't punishment. It's pressure reacting to potential. And now that the pressure didn't break you, it's starting to backfire. Attempts to stall your becoming have only spotlighted it. The distractions have grown louder, but so has discernment. The old tactics don't work anymore. The clarity that was once distant is now sharpening, and it's becoming obvious. The real battle was never about keeping you down. It was about keeping you distracted long enough to miss your arrival. But that moment's past. You've stepped over the threshold, and there's no returning to the quiet version of yourself. Your voice echoes where silence used to reign. Your discipline disrupts everything that once bound you. And every decision to keep going, to trust that internal pull, to walk even when uncertain, each one pushes back what thought it could outlast you. The weight you feel isn't just opposition, it's recognition. The unseen has already acknowledged what you're only just beginning to walk out. You've become the storm that was once being prevented, and now nothing familiar will be untouched by the fire of your forward motion. There are certain lives that do not fit into one world because they are designed to stretch between dimensions. Never quite at home among the familiar, yet never detached from the deeper current, flowing just beneath what most call real. That strange in-between, feeling too intense for the surface but too raw for the sanctuary, has always followed like a shadow. The burden didn't begin with you, and neither will it end there. This existence was appointed as a junction, an intersection between stories that failed and futures that now stand a chance. Old legacies full of silence, loss, and surrender all collide here in a soul commissioned to interrupt the repetition. There's a reason the weight feels heavier than what you've lived, because it includes what others passed down without language. The fractures behind you tried to claim you, but something within kept pulling you forward. This tension was never personal. It's structural, cosmic, inherited. This life is not passive. It's a current, a switch, a portal in motion. Decisions echo outward, altering more than outcomes. They shift lineage. When healing happens here, it's not isolated. It passes through invisible channels and shakes loose what was frozen for decades. Every time integrity is chosen over reaction, every time stillness replaces panic, a chain breaks somewhere unseen. That's what it means to be this kind of vessel. Nothing is small, even when it seems so. This isn't about arrival, it's about interruption, being the first to stop the storm before it becomes a legacy. That kind of impact draws resistance, not because of what you've done, but because of what flows through you. Forces that built themselves on silence and pain know that once you find your rhythm, their days are numbered. What has chased you is not after your comfort. It's after your potential to become a spiritual corridor where old patterns collapse and new truths are born. Dear brothers and sisters, may God's grace abound in your life. Whoever sows generously will also reap generously. 2 Corinthians 9:6. When you give with faith, blessings multiply. Click the super thank you button and sow a $40 seed. Trust that His abundance will return to you in ways beyond measure. There has always been coverage, even when it felt like collapse. There has always been intention, even in confusion, not because of perfection, but because of positioning. A life built to weld the spiritual to the practical, to bring presence into a world that favors performance. That strange inner knowing that never left, it was memory, not imagination. When you finally stopped turning in circles and started walking with direction, the path opened, and what used to be just a struggle became a transmission, a signal, a movement that connected what had been waiting to be redeemed with what was finally ready to act. The weight increased not as punishment, but as confirmation that the bridge was no longer dormant. Now everything responds, not because it's convenient, but because alignment activated spiritual circuitry. You are not only navigating your story, you're interpreting messages between planes. Every quiet act of love, every hard choice made in stillness, every word spoken with conviction, these are levers, switches, locks being opened across timelines. The misunderstanding of others does not negate your role. Their inability to grasp your volume does not shrink your assignment. This life was never meant to blend. It was shaped to carry contrast, to balance what others can't even name. Now that it has begun, neutrality is not an option. You are not passing through. You are the passage itself. And every time truth is chosen, the ground beneath both realms rearranges. This is not about being the strongest. It's about being available. The more consistent you become, the clearer the signal, the stronger the bridge. This existence is not about holding it all. It's about letting it flow through. And it will flow, because no one else was built to carry what you now move. Some stories are followed by fire, not because of what they destroy, but because of what they reveal. If the battle has felt relentless, it's because the blueprint beneath your skin was never ordinary. Forces have been circling, not to confuse you about your worth, but to prevent you from discovering it. And now that you're beginning to stand upright, the tension is confirmation, not condemnation. The intensity of the resistance always matches the potential it's trying to suppress. From the start, there was movement around you, forces preparing either to crush or crown, depending on which direction you chose. The early interference wasn't punishment for failure. It was preemptive disruption, designed to sever the roots of identity before they ever grew deep enough to hold ground. Nothing you lost was random. Nothing that walked away was without purpose. Even the collapse had choreography. The long silence wasn't absence, it was testing. But look again. Despite the weariness, you're still here, still holding, still choosing to breathe. And that alone exposes the lie that you were ever fragile. Survival wasn't the goal. Revelation was. What this war unveiled was the magnitude of what you carry. It wasn't meant to end you. It was meant to extract everything that no longer belongs. It clarified, distilled, refined. It took what was entangled in fear and carved it down to truth. Now you carry a sharpened awareness and a resilience that can't be taught, only earned through resistance. There's no longer a need to apologize for the scars. They were never signs of weakness. They're signals of survival. The narrative written in pain has now turned into proof. Proof that what you've been navigating is real. Proof that the pressure wasn't random. Proof that you've stepped into territory that threatens what prefers to remain untouched. This isn't a setback. It's a shift. You are not unraveling. You are being revealed. The hidden strength, the quiet faith, The clarity forged in the middle of the fire. It's all visible now. And with that visibility comes power. Not the loud kind, but the kind that moves systems just by standing in the room. You didn't endure because of luck. You endured because you were called to outlast what others surrendered to. That's not ego, it's evidence. Evidence that this life is an answer to something ancient, that your existence here is not reaction, it's strategy. The tremble you've caused in unseen realms is not your burden, it's your banner. And every time you keep moving forward in light of that, you become a living contradiction to everything that tried to keep you still. The battle is not your curse. It's your certification. And now, everything must adjust accordingly.